Live from Orlando, Florida. This is the Microsoft Power Platform Community Call, September 21st. My name is David Warner, and I will be your host for today. Let's talk about what we're going to talk about. We're going to see the latest updates and news. We're going to see a monthly community tip by Todd. Then we're going to attempt the picture mode today. It's going to be a little strange, but we're going to combine them together, group picture mode. And we've got three amazing presenters who are here live. Kat Schneider, Parsing JSON and Powerapps. Chris Piasecki on UX tips and tricks for model-driven apps. And Vivek Bavishi on you can be an independent publisher connector. Author. You can't be a connector yourself, but you can be an author, all right? Now, we want you to be part of this community. That means that you are welcome to actually present on this call. I don't recommend you come next month to this room. We won't be here physically, but you're always welcome to present as long as we're going back to online only starting next month. You can do that at aka.ms/ppcc demo request. Everyone is welcome. We want this to be your community, so we invite you to present. And the presentations, they don't need to be anything that you feel is more than they should be. Absolutely sharing a tip, a trick is more than welcome, so please don't hesitate to do that. Now, you may wonder, well, what else can I do in the community, and how can I get help? Sharing is Caring, which was actually a live session that some of you attended just previous to this, normally only online. We did a special for the Power Platform Conference, is where you can learn how to contribute to the community in a variety of ways. Now that means that you might want to submit a sample to the Power Platform Samples repository. You might want to learn a little bit more how to write for the web, how to present on these calls, and coming soon is going to be a Power Pages 2-part session by Hugo Bernier. He's been a little busy with something we call the Power Platform Conference, but we're going to get back to that as soon as this is over. All of these are available, and so we invite you to join them at no cost, ak.ms/sharing is caring. They are live, virtual, safe space opportunities for you to learn more. That means we don't record the sessions. You're able to join. We'll walk you through how to do things like submit a pull request on GitHub, or perhaps get the most out of VS Code. If you've not used it very much, we want to empower you to use it more for the Power Platform. You may be looking for some tips and tricks. Maybe you want to help write some documentation on how to better use the Power Platform. Guess what? You can do that too. That's a superpower, and it'll even get published at docs.microsoft.com. So don't hesitate to sign up for any and all of these sessions. You'll see more dates coming soon as the conference has gone by. Now, we want to recognize you at the same time for all the amazing work that you're doing. And we do that by more than just saying, thank you. We actually have a recognition program that is powered by Credly. Yes, many of you may say, I've heard of Credly. What is that? It's the badging platform that you get badges for when you're Microsoft certified. So it's associated to your LinkedIn account. You can share it on Twitter, put it on your resume, stick it on the fridge, all of that. Perfectly acceptable. And because you want to show your maybe clients, maybe your bosses, maybe both, that you're making a difference in the community, this is a perfect way. These are accredited and they're official, and you're able to get them over and over and over for a variety of ways in which you're going to be contributing to the community. So we don't want you to go unnoticed. Your hard work does not go unnoticed, and we want to thank you. So the recognition program is absolutely available to be recognized, and all you need to do is sign up. Just need you to opt in. It's absolutely free. We cover the cost for it. aka.ms/community-recognition. Woo! All right. Thank you. Heather Newman. All right. Now, what kind of upcoming events are there? The Low Code Revolution is actually being recorded live today from the community with our very favorite April Dunham. So she's going to be recording a segment today at the conference this afternoon, so be on the lookout for that. But for all of the other amazing Low Code Revolution videos, you can check that out at aka.ms/lowcoderevolution guest. Excuse me, Low Code Revolution show. And then if you want to be a guest, Low Code Revolution guest. Right? So this is an awesome opportunity. April is right here up front, and everybody sees her on camera. Everybody at home sees her on camera. Everybody here sees her in real life. You can join the call if you want to see her on camera too, I guess. All right? All right, let's dive into our first segment, our monthly community tip. And so for that, we're going to invite up Todd Baginski to give us that tip from a community member.
Thank you, David. All right, thank you, David. Good to see everybody here today. And today, I am doing the monthly community quick tip segment as usual, and I've got a tip from Andre and Alex today. The tip is get notified before you run out of Office 365 storage space. Has anybody seen this email before? This is the email you get when you run out of Office 365 storage space. It indicates that your site collection has run out of storage, is in a read-only state. Nobody wants to see this email. So how did Alex and Andre figure out a way to make sure you don't run out of storage space? Well, the first thing they did was they created a flow. And you'll notice at the top of the flow, this is a recurring flow. The first step in the flow here sets a variable that determines at what percentage or threshold of the storage space that you have used when you'd like to get an alert. This is where the magic comes in this step. This is a send an HTTP request to SharePoint action. Notice the green highlighted spot. This is the SharePoint Admin REST API. They're calling the storage quota API, and this is what they get back. The geo-use storage MB and tenant storage MB values you see here can be used to calculate how close you are to running out of storage. Later in the flow, the calculation is compared against that threshold variable that was set at the beginning of the flow. And if the threshold is exceeded, an email is sent to let you know you're running out of space. If not, the flow just logs that and closes. This is what the email looks like that the flow sends. It tells you what percentage the flow is configured to send the alert at, what percentage you're at, and the actual storage values inside of your site collection. You can download this entire flow and get an even deeper dive on this out on Andre's blog, and the link is right here. And if you have your own community quick tip, we would love to hear from you and get it right up here on the call in the future. So if you have one, come up to me afterward and let me know. And for all of you online, you can use this link right here. Thanks, everybody. Back to you, Dave.
Thanks, Todd. All right, everybody. So now we're going to attempt to do what time? Picture time. Okay, so again, bear with us, everybody. We're going to try to move this in. Feel free to move in, by the way, a little bit, everybody. We're going to combine the online and in person when we share this out. So what we're looking for is a little together mode right there. All right, so now we're going to see everybody online and in person. All right, so still a few seats left. All right, let's give everybody a wave here. In person and online. All right, excellent. Okay. All right. Everybody getting seated back in here now. Excellent. Okay, all right, well, let's move into our presenters for today. So we're going to start out with Kat Schneider. She's going to talk to us about parsing JSON in Powerapps. Kat, come on up. Come on down!
I guess we're going to do it this way. All right. So, hello, everybody. All right, here we go. So, somebody say something about cats and JSON. So, probably not, but, I am Kat Schneider. I am a Power Platform enthusiast. I'm also a self-taught coder, developer, programmer, had fun with it for a while here. I am a scientist by nature and by nurture, if you will. And I'm native-ish Floridian. There's 6 months that I don't have any control over. But I love making the impossible possible and trying to teach others how to do that as well. So, something about JSON. I'm kidding. It's actually the JavaScript object notation, otherwise known as JSON, which is what, you ask? It is a lightweight data interchange format that is easy for you and I to read, as well as for machines to take in and give back. So, okay. All right, so key value pairs are what is JSON, It's made up of a key, which is also known as a field name or a column name. And then that key value pair makes a record when it's inside of curly braces. And when you have multiple records all within inside of square braces, you have a table of records. So the problem or the puzzle, the reason that I'm here presenting today, is we have forever had this JSON function within Powerapps that's really great at you giving it a record or a table of records and it giving you a string back. But the problem, you don't just decode JSON right in Powerapps, right? So we only had really two options available to us. Is you could have premium connectors, which in my tenant, that was a no-no. We weren't paying for it. So the other option is you had to be really good at parsing it using regex expressions. I am not one of those that's really good at that. But lo and behold, right before my presentation, Microsoft developers put out this new Parse JSON function. That is not what I'm here to talk about. But just so you guys know, in case you wanted to parse JSON in the future, there is a function that's out there. It's experimental. If you don't see it, you may have to change your authoring version in order to get that. But there's a blog post about it, and there's a bunch of documentation. So if you're interested, check it out. So I was able to parse JSON actually using some regex. And granted, I am not a master of regex. I happen to be trying to get some information from SharePoint. There was a HTTP request that Todd just talked about where I was trying to return a bunch of information. It was coming back as JSON. I was trying to pull it back into a Power App. And I was trying to figure out how to get it in there, so I decided to turn it into an HTML table, and I happened to notice some unique features of this HTML table. So all of my keys, they were always going to be in header tags of the HTML table. So I was able to use this short little regex expression. All of the rows were always going to be within the table row tags, which meant that I could use this short expression. And then I knew that all the rows would contain the same number of cell tags as the header tags, but they were always going to be in the exact same order. So I could use this expression to get all of those cell tags. And then this formula or function, set of functions here, I was able to call the Power Automate, give it the information, and have it spit the information back out. If it was a record, I was using an ungroup function to get all of the pieces and parts, but a table of records, I didn't need to do that. So this here is an example of a record that I'm trying to parse with this solution here. It's from the users 365 table, and it's my record. It's just a single record. When I come in here and click on the Parse JSON function, or the Parse JSON button, I get the input of that string into the trigger, and then I check to see if it's a record or if it's a table. If it's a record, I add some square braces, and then I convert it to JSON, feed it to the HTML table, and then feed that output back to the Power App. Once I did that, I was able to put all of those key value pairs into a gallery that allowed me to see all of those values, and then I could actually go back in there and make changes to those values, which I could eventually use that to push back. This here is an example of trying to use a SharePoint site collection to get some information. Here I wanted to get all the lists and libraries. Put in the URL for my site collection, click this button, which then triggers my Power Automate, which triggered that SharePoint site collection. That then goes in as the trigger, and instead of the flow that I just showed you here, I actually updated it. So the input is the site address that I just put in the text box, and then I use that result to put into the HTML table and push back into Powerapps. Doing that same thing, I then get a list of all of those lists and libraries from SharePoint. I can click on one of those lists, and I get all of the key value pairs, all of the data or the properties from that list library. So some of the lessons that I learned is sometimes when you're stuck on a problem, you got to take it all the way back to the original what was the issue, what was I trying to solve, and sometimes put it into its simplified parts. By abstracting, I was able to come up with the solution. And that you don't need a degree or 30 years of development experience in order to solve a problem that you or others might be having within the Power platform. So low code, no code happens to be a great equalizer and allows many people to get in there and do the things that they need to do in order to make their lives easier. The community is a fantastically helpful resource. Please use it. Don't abuse it. People will not go out there and figure out your entire solution, but you can ask for help and people are there to help you. That is all for me.
Awesome. Thank you, Kat. Thank you for the other one. Excellent. All right. Next up, we're going to have Chris Piasecki on UX and tips and tricks for model-driven apps. So Chris says hi in the camera. Is coming on up.
Thank you, David. Hello, everyone here in Orlando, and good morning, or good evening for those online, wherever you may be. My name is Chris Piasecki. I'm a Microsoft MVP from Edmonton, a city in Canada, in case you may not have noticed by my attire that I'm Canadian. I'm currently a Power Platform architect and senior consultant working at CGI. And so for my demo today, I'm just going to be giving you some short, quick, rapid-fire tips that will help improve the user experience in model-driven apps. I'll find that some of these tips are not obvious to new makers because a lot of the options are still kind of hidden away in the class or user experience, and it's hard to kind of get to them. So I hope that at least some of these tips are useful to some of you out there, and you may learn something. So with that, we'll go ahead and jump into the demo. So when it comes to lookup controls on model-driven forms, one default behavior you may notice is that when you click into the lookup control, you actually will see a list of recently viewed records from that lookup table. Now, a lot of users will find this distracting or confusing because it has nothing to do with the record they want to search for. So that brings us to the first tip I have for you is how we can actually go and disable the recently used items. And to do this, we simply need to just hop over to the modern form designer. We need to just find our lookup control. In this case, it's the primary context. We'll go ahead and select it, and we'll have an option on the side here to actually simply disable recently used items. So we just need to check that box, and then we'll go ahead and publish our form. We'll hop back over to our model-driven app and refresh the page. And now when you actually go ahead and click in the lookup control, you'll see that those recently viewed items are no longer there. So you can now freely search for the record you want without those items distracting you. Now, when it comes to working with related data on a model-driven form, you'll notice that every form by default, you'll get this related tab. And this allows you to view related records from any one-to-many or many-to-many relationship. Now, however, if you have a lot of relationships, this list can become quite large and quite cluttered and distracting, and some of them might not be really relevant to the users. So the second tip I have for you is how we can actually go ahead and pick and choose items that we want to hide from this related items tab. So to do that, we're going to have to switch back over to our form designer, but the problem is we're not able to change this from the modern form designer, so we actually have to switch over to the classic experience to change this configuration. So we're going to go ahead and click the switch to classic, which will open a new tab. And so across the top ribbon, we have this navigation. We just simply need to select that, which will allow you to modify this common tab you see on the left-hand side, which will show all of those items in the related tab you see on the model-driven form. So if we actually hop back, you'd see under related, but it's also called common, so that's why that's called that. So we just simply can select the item that we want to remove. In this case, we'll choose the social profiles. We just select it. We just need to click the remove button on the top of the ribbon. And then we just really simply need to save and publish the form. We'll hop back over to our model-driven app and then refresh the page. We can do it. There we go. And now you'll notice that the social profiles table is no longer showing in the related tab. So that was tip number 2. Nice and easy. Now the third tip I have for you is related to the second one, in that sometimes users may just not want to see the related tab whatsoever. The good news is this is also very easy to turn off. And to do that, we're going to also need to once again jump back over to the classic experience, because this is not available in the modern form designer. And so we're going to hop back over to the classic experience. And then we're just going to select the form properties across the top ribbon. We'll hop over to the display tab. And then underneath, there'll be a section under navigation. Basically, they uncheck the show related items. And you just simply need to save and publish the form. And once again, we'll refresh the page in our model-driven app. And just like that, you'll no longer see the related tab showing up. So that was tip number 3. Now, jumping back to lookups. So another default behavior that you may notice is that when you actually select the lookup record, it'll actually navigate you away from your current form, what you're doing, losing your current context, which can be quite unproductive. A similar behavior, if you want to create a new record from a lookup control, is that there'll be 2 behaviors. If you happen to have quick create enabled for that table, it'll open up a quick create form in a side dialog you see here. But if you don't have quick create enabled, it'll actually open up or navigate you away to a new form, once again losing that current context, providing an unproductive user experience, which is not great for your users. Well, the good news is we can actually do some simple configurations to actually open up a dialog rather than navigating away. And so to do that, we can do this configuration in the modern designer. So we'll click back over to our lookup control, and just below the disable recently used items that we put in tip number 1, we have these 2 new options, and one is use main form dialog for creating and use main form dialog for editing. So we can enable one or both of these options by simply just toggling those and then just publishing the form. And then we'll hop back over to our model-driven app and refresh the page once again. And now when we actually go in to create a new record from a lookup control, you'll see now that instead of navigating away, you'll actually be presented with the main form dialog for that lookup record, where you can go ahead and create the record without losing your context. Similar behavior, if you now go ahead and select to edit an existing record, it'll also open that up in a main form dialog, where you can easily edit the field and see the full details of the record. So again, much more productive user experience if they haven't lost that current context. And so that was tip number 4. So this brings us to our 5th and final tip I have for you today. And a lot of you may be already familiar with this feature, but I think it's such a nice feature that it's worth special mentioning. So for the longest time, we've been able to define what are called quick view forms that allows us to view related information from a lookup directly on the form. However, a big limitation of this is that the fields have only been able to be read-only. So if you want to go and modify that data, you have to, again, navigate away to that related record to modify the details. Well, the great news is now, pretty recently, there was added a feature called a form component control, which allows you to embed a main form from a lookup table directly inside of the main form. And assuming you have the correct privileges to edit the record, you can actually edit those related details inline in the form without having to navigate away. So in order to demonstrate that, I've created a simple main form dialog similar to the quick view that just has a couple of attributes, the email and the phone tab. And then to actually use the form component control, we're going to have to flip over to the classic form designer experience once again to configure this. So we'll go ahead and do that. And so we're going to just add another instance of the primary contact lookup field. So we're just going to check the view only unused items. We'll find primary contact and drag that onto the form. Then we just simply need to double click to open up the properties of that lookup. And And from there, we just need to go into the Controls tab, add a control, and there'll be a form component control that you see. We'll select the render in the web navigation, and then we also just need to simply provide a value for the forms property. And what we need to provide is actually just a little bit of an XML snippet, and I'll kind of briefly show what that looks like. So you can see here that there's two pieces of information that you'll need to modify. There's the entity name, which you'll have to provide the schema name of the table for the lookup that you want to modify. And the second piece of information is you need the unique identifier of the main form dialog that you want to embed in the control. And you can retrieve the identifier of the form through the URL of the modern designer, as you can see here, kind of after the entity name. You can see kind of form edits and grab that unique identifier. So you just pop that in, we'll hit OK, and then we're going to go ahead and save and publish the form once more. And then we'll hop back over to our model-driven app and refresh the page. And so now you can see here above our quick view form, we now have the embedded main form control. And as you can see, we can actually now edit these fields directly. And when you go ahead and save the form, it'll save the changes from not only the main record, but also do a save from the related record as well. And so just like that, you can now much more easily work with related data on your model-driven forms. And so with that being said, I'm just going to wrap it up for me. I hope you find at least a couple of these tips useful. And yeah, as I mentioned, feel free to connect with me if you want to chat further. All right, thanks everyone.
Woo! Awesome. Thank you. Okay, next up is Vivek on how you can all be an author of an independent publisher connector. So, Vivek, it's all yours.
Thank you, David. Hello, everyone. I'm Vivek Pavishi. I won't be saying the title again because it's a mouthful. But yeah, I'm going to be talking about independent publisher connector and how you can submit one. But a little bit about me. I'm a business applications MVP. Have been one for 3 years. I work as a senior solutions consultant at Hitachi Solutions. And as you can see, the Power Addicts badge, the retro ones. Being a part of that community, I mean, it says 3 years, but probably more than that now. And that's some ways you can kind of have. I used to make a bunch of videos, but now I have a baby. But yeah, you can follow me on Twitter as well.
Videos are just different now, right?
Yeah, different videos now. So the agenda, I'll briefly talk about the whole publisher program, Independent Publisher Connector. I'll try to make it as a 5-step process, easy to understand. And we'll look at each of the step, a bit of a demo of each of the steps as well. So the independent publisher connectors, anyone can submit a connector. So if you have an API service that you want to create a custom connector and submit, you can submit one. All these certified connectors can be used by anyone else on the platform. So you are contributing to something which, as Charles mentioned, like 7.4 million active makers. So yeah, they can use that. And then it opens up the possibility to connect to so many services, right? So there are so many services. Every business has different APIs that they want to connect to. So you can not only just create it for yourself, but something that others can use. Right. So the 5-step process: propose, build, document, prepare, and submit. So if you want to just take a screenshot of that, that would be it's something that you can kind of just. It's a long process if you go to the docs, but this will help you kind of streamline your process and not feel like it's a long one. So the first step, process, you want to make sure that Troy is right now sitting here. Make sure that he hasn't submitted a connector. So, because 90% of the connectors are submitted by him. Yeah, you can create a proposal first. So on the GitHub repository, create a fork. And then once you have created a fork, start with cloning that in VS Code. Once you have cloned it, you can create a local repository. So once you have that, it will show you all the folders. And because you want to submit a proposal, First, you want to create a different branch. So that's something that, so any new connector, you can keep creating new branches. So here I'm trying to submit a proposal for PayPal. So I've created the branch, published the branch, and now so now that you have a branch, you want to create a new folder within the independent publisher connector. So I'm creating a new PayPal branch. You always want to add a Readme file so that it doesn't have to be complete because you're proposing right now, but add some information in there so that people know what the connector is about. Once you have your Readme file, commit those changes, publish it, and then once you are done with that, you want to submit the pull request. I know if you're not aware about GitHub, I'm going very fast here, but it's a 10-minute demo. So once you have the pull request, make sure you add proposal in the title, followed by the independent publisher, the connector's name, and then independent publisher so that it can be identified. The GitHub repository is for all the connectors, not just independent publisher. So now that you have submitted the proposal, now people know that someone's working on this, and you can check this before you submit the same connector. You can always add changes to that connector, but make sure, and you can also collaborate with others. So the next step is to build the connector. So to build the connector, if you're not aware, you have to create a custom connector. So you can go to custom connectors in Powerapps or Power Automate. Make sure you have this icon background color. They are specific about this. So that specific color has to be there. And then you want to define the security, if it's API key or auths, things like that. You want to define all your actions, triggers in the connector. Also, there's an option to add code. So if you need some custom code to add in there, C#, you can add that. And then you want to test and make sure that all of the actions are working. Take a screenshot of this because this is what you'll need to submit when you're submitting the final pull request. So make sure everything is working with that green check mark. And then also create a test flow. So make sure you have at least 3 actions in there which are working from that connector, and take a screenshot of each action as well. Again, something that you'll need. Next step is a little bit of the boring part of the process, which is documenting. Everyone loves documenting, right? So you want to make sure you have a good title to the connector. So in this case, it's Rebrandly. This is the connector I submitted. Make sure you have a description, which is something which people will look at, what the service is about, so they can search for this as well when they're searching for a connector. So make sure it defines the service. And then all your actions, right? Every action that you've added to the connector, you want to define a summary, a description, and it has, there are some guidelines to that. I've put a reference link in the end, but make sure that is something, because this is what, when they add the connector, will show up, and we'll see that in a minute. So you want to add a good description for each action. And within your actions, if you have any parameters, like a destination, here we are trying to create a short URL. So the destination URL, which is going to point to, so make sure that you have a good description. So all these descriptions should be in English. And then also add response. So anything, the response that you get back from the action, everything that you get back, you want to define a description for that as well, because that's how we can use that in the flow. So here, if you see that action, where it says the domain that this link should belong to, the destination URL, things like that, all that gets showed up in the connector. All right, so now that you have done the most challenging part, which is documenting, you want to prepare the connector files so that you can submit that. So in VS Code, you can download the PACon CLI, which is a connector. They have actually added to Power Platform now as well. But you have to log in, then you have to download. So PACon download. It'll show you a list of environments that you have within your tenant. And then it'll show you all the connectors. I have 58 connectors over there. And then you specify the number of the connector, and it will download that to your local folder, and it will show up on the left with all those files. So it will download the files for which you just created a custom connector. Within the files, make sure, so these are the things which you can't add in the wizard, you have to add it in these files. So you have some more documenting, right? So you want to define the publisher, that's your name. My name's that API guy. The stack owner would be the service, which is Readme. And then there's some other metadata as well that you need to add, which would be the website of the service, a privacy policy URL, so that's also required, and the category of the connector. So in this case, it's a marketing and social media connector. So there's a list of those which you can choose from. And then you also want to add your name, contact, it's required. Although, I mean, Troy has a little bunch and he doesn't get so many emails. So, but you want to give some support. So you want to give your email there. And once you are done with all that, make sure you validate the connector. So you use PA-con validate. This is a place where it will tell you if you're missing a description, any title, summary, things like that. And if it's running fine, I mean, if it's all good, it might give you a few warnings. You can skip the warnings, but try to make sure that everything has to be validated. Otherwise, if you submit, they'll come back to you. They'll be like, go ahead, add these descriptions. It just becomes a long process. So make sure you validate. So if you see this one, it's only just a few warnings, which is fine. And I can go ahead and submit that. So the last step before submitting was creating the README file. So if you see there are multiple things, there's a template for this, which you can download. And you need to specify the Readme service, the description about that, the operations that are included in it, how to get the credentials. That's really important because people might not know how to get an API key, the client credentials for an OAuth, so you want to define that as well. And the last step is to submit the connector. So here I'm showing a screenshot of the recording of the connector that I submitted, Readme. So you want to make sure you check those boxes, make sure that you have followed that. So the color of that connector, make sure that you're choosing that. You have all these artifacts. So you need to name, so you need to remove that proposal thing. You just have to have the name and independent publisher. And these are all the screenshots that I was talking about. You need to take those screenshots, paste it in here so that you can tell them that this is a working connector. And once you're done with all this, you're good to submit the connector. And once you've submitted, just wait. It takes a few days sometimes for them to respond back. They have a big backlog. But once you are done submitting, they'll respond back. Everything looks good. It will take 2 weeks, I think, for them to deploy to production. So yeah, it takes time. It's something they have to validate before it gets available for the whole Power Platform people using that. So these are some resources. Basically what I went through, it's in detail over there. The GitHub repo and also the certification process. Okay?
All right, thanks, Vivek. All right, everybody. Well, let's wrap it up here today with some resources. You've got lots of opportunity to get some assistance here within the community. There's training, there's samples, videos, a plethora of opportunities for you to get more connected with the community. There's also plenty of developer calls and community calls. So the Microsoft 365 platform is a weekly call. This happens on Tuesday. What's really special about this one is that it is only Microsoft presenters. All right, so that means you're getting it directly from the mothership. I call it a crystal ball into the what's now, what's new, what's next into Microsoft. So you can go subscribe and get an invite for that at aka.ms/m365-dev-call. If you can't make it, all these calls are recorded, so you can always watch them on demand after the fact. We've also got adaptive cards, Microsoft Identity Platform, Office add-ins, Power Platform, which you are at now, and then we've got 2 more bi-weekly sibling calls. The first is the Microsoft 365 and Power Platform Development. That occurs bi-weekly on Thursday, so that will be occurring next week. And then the Viva Connections and SharePoint Framework, which is the sibling to that bi-weekly Thursday call, also on Thursday at 7 a.m. Pacific. You can get access to all these calls at aka.ms/m365/calls. Thank you, everybody, for attending virtually and here in person in Orlando. The recording will be available probably within a little bit more than 24 hours since we got to process it while we're here in Florida. You can access it at aka.ms/m365pnp/videos, but if you subscribe today, you absolutely will get alerted when it will be available. You can follow us on Twitter at Microsoft 365 Dev and at M365PNP. Our next call will be October 19th, 2022 at 8 a.m. Pacific, and you can get access to that invite at aka.ms/Power Platform Community Call and see all the other calls at aka.ms/M365PNP. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in at home and for attending here in person. Have a great rest of your day, weekend, and the conference.